The French and Indian War was fought between the British and the French, along with their respective Native American allies, over control of land in North America, particularly the Ohio River Valley. The British colonists wanted to expand westward into lands claimed by France. Tensions exploded into war in 1754, when a young officer named George Washington led a skirmish that would spiral into full-scale conflict. The war was brutal and widespread, involving colonial militias, British regulars, French forces, and Native American tribes. While the British eventually emerged victorious, it came at a staggering cost. The 1763 Treaty of Paris gave Britain control over Canada and all French territory east of the Mississippi River. It was a stunning victory, but also the beginning of a long and expensive problem. See, Britain's war debt had nearly doubled during the conflict. The empire now had more land to defend, more people to manage, and far fewer resources to do it. So, to recoup the cost of war and maintain a standing army in America, Parliament turned to the colonies. British leaders believed the colonies should help pay for their own defense. After all, the war had protected their land and expanded their security. But the colonists disagreed. Many believed they had already paid their fair share in blood through local militias and in taxes raised by their own colonial governments. They resented the idea of being taxed directly by Parliament where they had no elected representatives. This was the beginning of a dangerous divide. As the war ended, colonists looked westward to the newly won lands beyond the Appalachian Mountains. Many hoped to claim land and start new lives. But the British Crown had other plans. In 1763, King George III issued the Proclamation of 1763 forbidding settlement west of the Appalachians. This was meant to ease tensions with Native American tribes and prevent future wars, but it infuriated land-hungry colonists. Many ignored the decree, heading west anyway. This was one of the first major signs that the colonists and the Crown had different visions for America's future. And then in 1764, Parliament passed the Sugar Act, which placed duties on molasses, sugar, and other goods imported into the colonies. It also cracked down on smuggling and strengthened British enforcement. Though the tax was relatively small, it set off alarm bells. For the first time, the British government was attempting to raise revenue directly from the colonies without the approval of their local assemblies. The colonists argued that this violated their rights as Englishmen. According to the tradition of English law, taxes could not be imposed without representation. The following year brought an even more direct assault: the Stamp Act of 1765. This law required colonists to purchase a special stamped paper for newspapers, legal documents, licenses, and even playing cards. This time, the outcry was massive. From Boston to Charleston, protests erupted. Colonial newspapers attacked the act. Lawyers refused to comply, and angry mobs targeted tax collectors. The Sons of Liberty, a secret resistance group led by men like Samuel Adams and John Hancock, emerged to organize opposition. The rallying cry was born: no taxation without representation. The colonists argued that they had no voice in Parliament and therefore no obligation to obey its taxes. In October 1765, delegates from 9 colonies met in New York for the Stamp Act Congress, one of the first united political actions taken by the colonies. They issued a declaration stating that only colonial assemblies had the legal right to tax the colonists. This unity across the colonies was unprecedented. While the colonies were still loyal to the king, many now questioned Parliament's authority over their internal affairs. Faced with economic boycotts and mounting unrest, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in 1766. But it was a hollow victory. On the same day Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, it passed the Declaratory Act, asserting that Britain had the right to make laws for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. To colonial leaders, this was a chilling reminder that the battle was far from over. And just a year later, new taxes were imposed under the Townshend Acts, which targeted goods like glass, paper, paint, and tea. These acts also strengthened customs enforcement and allowed for the use of writs of assistance blanket search warrants that violated personal privacy. Colonial resistance flared up again. This time, women joined the front lines by organizing boycotts of British goods. Homespun clothing became a symbol of patriotism. Newspapers, sermons, and town meetings turned against British policy. The idea of American rights and the need to protect them was spreading like wildfire. Tensions reached a boiling point in March 1770, when British soldiers fired into a crowd of protesting colonists in Boston, killing 5 civilians. Among the dead was Crispus Attucks, a man of African and Native American descent, who became one of the first martyrs of the American cause. The incident, known as the Boston Massacre, shocked the colonies. Paul Revere's famous engraving, though exaggerated, portrayed the British as bloodthirsty oppressors and was used to fuel anti-British sentiment. The soldiers were put on trial, and remarkably, most were acquitted thanks in part to a young lawyer named John Adams, who believed in the rule of law even for unpopular defendants. Still, the damage was done. The colonial view of Britain had darkened. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act, allowing the British East India Company to sell tea directly to the colonies, bypassing colonial merchants and effectively creating a monopoly. Though the tea was cheaper, the principle angered colonists. They saw it as another attempt to control them without consent. In response, a group of colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. This act of defiance became known as the Boston Tea Party. It was bold, it was illegal, and it would spark a furious response from Britain. In response, 12 of the 13 colonies sent delegates to Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. There, they issued declarations of rights and grievances, organized boycotts, and prepared for the possibility of armed resistance. While some still hoped for reconciliation, many were now talking openly about self-rule. The seeds of revolution had been planted. Years of escalating taxes, laws, and violence had convinced many colonists that compromise with Britain was no longer possible. The cry for liberty was growing louder and soon it would explode into revolution. All right, click here to grab a review packet, which is going to help you get an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May. If you want me to keep making these videos, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.